Great. Well, I'll dive in just a second. My name is Jeff Dieffenbach, and I'm on staff at MIT in the Mechanical Engineering Department, and I work in the area of education and workforce development. So first, digital credentials, what are they? I think there are two useful definitions. The first is a credential itself. It's a token representing an achievement. That could be a diploma, it could be a gold medal, it could be a dollar bill, and I'm going to reference things in the United States because that's my background. I think what we're talking about here is applicable more broadly. A digital credential, it's a digital file representing an achievement. Typically, that might be some learning that you do or some performance that you carry out. Let's talk a little bit about the characteristics of a digital credential. First of all, the achievement itself is definable, what has been done. The achievement may be verifiable, but I want to emphasize maybe. If we think about lots of assertions that we make today, for instance, in a resume, most of those would take the recipient of the resume a lot of effort to verify. And so while verifiable is good, it's not necessary, and it shouldn't be the gold standard necessarily. And the recipient in turn can verify back with the issuer that this is a real credential. That verification doesn't necessarily have to be a direct communication to the issuer, either manual or automated. You can build the verification into the credential itself, but in effect, that's going back to the issuer and validating that it's a verified credential. Doesn't have to be verified. An achiever might say, I did this thing, and the recipient can choose to believe that or not. Perhaps they probe with the achiever whether that's been accomplished. The thing about credentials today, though, relatively few recipients have aggregated their credentials into, for instance, LinkedIn or a much more robust digital wallet. And even fewer have shared these credentials with prospective employers or academic institutions. MIT has leadership in a group called the Digital Credentials Consortium, which is a group of, I believe now 12 to 15 universities, that number is growing, looking at digital credentials and how they can be filled with content and how they can move around in this ecosystem or landscape. They did a report several months ago now, back in September of last year, looking at credentials to employment, the last mile. They were trying to look at the promise of digital credentials and how that compares to widespread adoption, which we haven't reached yet. So the potential value, I can match a candidate to a job. I can broaden my talent funnel, perhaps by looking into a marketplace of people, of candidates. I can ensure authenticity with verification, and I can manage talent pathways within an organization. So apparently resumes aren't getting the job done, and that in theory provides some fertile ground for the expansion of digital credentials. Today, and for those of you who've applied for jobs, certainly in the US system, this is what happens. You're the employee or the candidate. You've got an employer in mind. You see a job description that they've posted. You put together a resume and likely a cover letter in response. The problem is this job description tends to be what I'll call overly stuffed. It's maybe the ideal if the employer had the perfect candidate and could get everything they needed, but you can't really tell from the items on a resume. Maybe it says required and optional, but beyond that, within the required skills, which ones are truly important to the employer? In between the two are applicant tracking systems. So a job is created, the employer starts here, the job gets published, job seekers apply, applicants are screened, and this is really where the problems start to arise and the applicants are screened. It's typically keyword-based, so particularly well-formatted resume from a keyword standpoint might generate a hit, something missing might not, but if the resume is any kind of reflection on the person applying, maybe their chances are good, but if it's not, they aren't. So what we really have in between these two is an anti-transparency system. And this doesn't just hurt the employee, it hurts the employer because we're not matching up needs with abilities. So let's get a little bit less pessimistic than I've been so far. Here's where we're headed. Competencies let us build the future, the workplace future. Let's imagine that an employer can, in an articulate way, list out the competencies that are needed for a job. I'm an employee. I can talk about the competencies that I have available, what I demonstrate that I can do. And there's going to be some alignment here. We can use this alignment, which probably won't be perfect for any given employee, for an employer to make a judgment, well, of the things that we need, the employee doesn't have all of them, but they have many of them. And we think that the gaps are closable, or maybe we just get by without them. So here's the vision for the future of digital credentials. And this would be almost entirely automated once the learner has done the learning, and once the employer has decided what's important in a job. These competencies needed and competencies available. And again, keep in mind that these are digital now and can be defined, assessed, issued, and in some cases verified. The employer might broadcast out into some system that this job is available and what it's made up of. The employee can choose to apply and automatically transfer their credentials. These two things meet in the middle. Alternately, you might have an employee who's broadcasting out their capabilities. That's something that an employer can look for, detecting that availability, sending an inquiry to find out if there's interest. The employee accepts, and again, there's an automatic credential transfer. Thank you for your attention. It's an exciting space to be in, and I think lots of promise, but also some barriers that have to be knocked out of the way.